This is a much smaller role, and Alaska only has 2,229 miles of designated roadways within the National Highway System, which is just 12.6% of its total public network, and not as much freight traffic passes through it as you would find in other states. This means that Canada's tolls would affect a crucial but relatively small segment of traffic. That is, of course, if British Columbia manages to implement these tolls in the first place. To achieve this symbolic victory, British Columbia would have to navigate a tricky legal and logistical minefield. Let's tackle the legal aspect first. The proposed toll system faces a major legal challenge, an existing treaty between Canada and the US specifically concerning the Alaska Highway. The Alaska Highway is a 1,387-mile stretch of road that serves as the primary land route between Alaska and the rest of the US. Built during World War II as a military route, it's now the main overland connection for residents, industries, and tourists alike. The highway stretches through some of the most remote, rugged landscapes in North America, with weather and road conditions that make it feel more like a survival challenge than a scenic drive. But we'll explore this highway in more detail later. For now, let's get back to why its toll system would be a legal headache. You see, under the treaty we just mentioned, Canada is explicitly prohibited from imposing tolls on any portion of the highway system used for the transport of goods between the US and Alaska. Article 2 of this treaty states, Canada will not impose any highway toll or permit any such toll to be charged for the use of such highways by vehicles or persons. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Plus, this includes not just imposing fees directly, but also any indirect charges, effectively blocking tolls on the highway used for the transportation of goods. The treaty aims to facilitate smooth and uninterrupted transport along this critical route, which, as mentioned, serves as the sole land link between Alaska and the rest of the US. The 1977 agreement also ensures that the US and Canada will jointly maintain the Alaska Highway, with the US funding reconstruction and Canada overseeing its upkeep. Adding tolls would not only violate these terms, but would also risk complicating the collaborative infrastructure maintenance outlined in the agreement. The legal precedent set by this treaty means that EB's proposed tolls could violate international agreements, forcing British Columbia to face a diplomatic and legal battle. But given how determined British Columbia seems to be to fight back, it wouldn't be shocking if its premier found some sneaky loophole to wiggle through. After all, EB is a man on a mission, one that won't be deterred by anything, not a pesky treaty, and not logistical challenges. As far as these logistical, or should we say technical challenges go, British Columbia's plans could hit a few bumps in the road. For starters, the province doesn't currently have any toll stations along its highways leading to Alaska. This fact probably has something to do with the treaty we keep mentioning. But even if legal barriers were somehow sidestepped, the technical side of things isn't as simple as it sounds. As Ranj Pillai, the premier of Yukon, another province considering tolls, points out, implementing tolls would require significant new infrastructure. Think toll booths, staff to operate them, and likely a brand new set of regulations to get everything up and running. We've got to look at what our actions are and what legal tools we have to make those decisions, said Pillai, sounding a bit like someone who's about to open a can of worms. It's one thing to talk tough, it's another to actually build the system to back it up. Myers, however, doesn't seem to agree with Pillai. Although he isn't in favor of tolls for his state, he doesn't consider tolling rocket science in this case. After all, trucks already have to stop at way stations for safety checks, so adding toll booths wouldn't be a massive leap. But Myers isn't the only one who isn't fond of these tolls. Jamie Benson, the executive director of the Alaska Trucking Association, has also voiced strong concerns. She said the proposal will significantly increase transportation costs, disrupt supply chains, and raise prices for essential goods that Alaskans rely on. Benson urged provincial policymakers to remember the great relationship between Alaska and British Columbia, hoping the federal governments could find a way to avoid tariffs. Seems like the pressure's building on all sides. But you know who doesn't care about this pressure? The people of Canada. Take the folks in Yukon as an example. They're not just sitting back and hoping this all blows over. No, they're getting creative with their retaliation. Pillai has heard from residents who are practically pitching an action plan, including ideas like banning Alaska athletes from the upcoming Arctic Winter Games. And if you think that's bold, some Yukoners are even suggesting they put a ban on none other than Donald Trump himself. Yep, you heard that right. The man known for big game hunts in the territory might find himself on the do not enter list, and he will surely have to earn his way back. These unconventional ideas paint a pretty clear picture. Canada won't back down. Even though Trump has eased off some of his initial tariff threats, EB has been firm. We will not tolerate these ongoing threats and uncertainty. We're standing up for Canadians. The toll proposal, though mostly symbolic for now, speaks volumes. The number of trucks affected might be small, but the message behind it is loud and clear. Canada's frustrated and ready to stand its ground. This piling frustration makes us wonder, how far could Canada go? Could it cut off Alaska completely? Let's hypothesize a little. If Canada wanted to cut off Alaska from the rest of the US, it would need to disrupt key transportation and supply routes. Here's how that could be done in theory. First up, blocking land access. With the tolls we discussed, Canada is already making moves in this department, but a true blockade would mean something much more drastic, closing down the Alaska Highway, cutting off the only major overland connection between Alaska and the lower 48 states. As mentioned, this highway is a lifeline for everything from fuel to food to industry in Alaska. So you can imagine the chaos if Canada decided to pull the plug on it. After all, Alaska is already struggling with accessibility. Some parts of the biggest US state, like the town of Hyder, depend entirely on Canadian infrastructure. You can't drive into Hyder unless you go through Stewart, British Columbia, or hop on a float plane. Block that road and you've isolated entire communities. Throw in the fact that parts of Alaska are only reachable by road through Canada, Haines and Skagway come to mind. And you can see how shutting down the highway would disrupt the entire region. But let's be real, could Canada actually pull this off? Technically, yes. Almost 80% of the Alaska Highway lies on Canadian soil, which gives the country significant leverage. But a blockade would mean shutting down a road that's responsible for nearly all the goods and services that move into and out of Alaska by land, which wouldn't be without consequences.